Okay, I'm just going to be natural with this, okay? This is my second video. Hey there, how are you? And how is your day? I trust you enjoy yourself. Okay, so today I will be talking on the topic of why you need to choose your suffering. Yeah, you need to choose your suffering. I'm sure it's somewhere down there, or maybe on top. I don't know where it is on your screen, but yeah, that's what we're talking about. So for the next 5 minutes, we will be considering why you need to suffer. What is suffering? Why do we suffer? What is the goal of suffering? And do we have anything to say about it? Do we have a say in choosing whether we want to suffer or not? Okay. So fast forward. Suffering, simply put, means going through an unpleasant situation or event, which most times is painful, arduous, torturous, and maybe unbearable. This is Opinion Alley, so that's my opinion. Okay. So what's the goal of suffering? When the value of a thing is not known, one great man once said, abuse of that thing is inevitable. As with everything in life, everything serves a purpose, okay? It is either working for you or against you. But if it's in you, by virtue of, as with suffering, of course, which comes from us, inside of us, okay? Excuse me. If it's in you, then it must have a significant purpose as to your being. Okay, so we should not, I beg to say, we should move ourselves to the whole, away from the idea. We should disenfranchise ourselves away from the idea that suffering is something we should all do to feel proud about. Okay, it's not necessarily all bad. A great teacher in history once pointed out something. He said, the story says that he was in agony in the garden. He was crying to a point where his tears were dripping as though they were blood. The sweat from his body was as though they were blood. And he said, if it's possible that this cup passes me by, please let it pass. Invariably, no sane human being wants to suffer. Granted, in some religious group, we will also therefore understand by virtue of the story I just told, that even God himself doesn't want to suffer. Yes, that's why he begged. But then it's a natural disposition for human beings to go through stages of life that would lead them to growth. And most times these stages will not always be pleasant. So what do we do when we find ourselves in unpleasant situations? Okay, do we go around them, over them, or through them? What do we do? You're not saying anything. Of course, I can hear you. I'm making a video, so yeah, I can say anything. So what we do is entirely up to us. Oh, I wish I could tell you, oh, I know what you can do to evade suffering. No, the whole compendium of what your life is by virtue of your existence entirely up to you to live. If there was a particular person who could tell you how well you should live your life, then it wouldn't be worth living, would it? And that is why that is partly the reason why I started Opinion Alley. Because if you watch the first video, somewhere in the idea of what perception is the idea that men have crammed into the heads of little babies, who of course would not argue, that they, as kids, had to do a particular thing to get a particular result. They have to go to school, get a degree, get a job, then start a family, give birth to children, and voila, wait for pension, retire, and die. In between that theory of what life should be, where the questions creative minds like Einstein asked, like Isaac Newton, like Robert Greene, like the exceptional persons in society who are not really exceptional by virtue of the natural endowment, but by virtue of the fact that they stood and dared to be contrarians, as Busi Temukwara would call them, and have questioned, critique those ideas and philosophies that were forcefully, whether we want to accept it or not, they were, to some degree, forced down our throats. Yes, we didn't really want to go to school now, did we? No. We didn't really want to read now, did we? No. Most of us didn't even like mathematics, but we did mathematics nonetheless. We studied just because, of course, we wanted to pass, we wanted the society to approve of us, we wanted our parents to validate of our person and say, oh, my son, you made me proud. I'd say, am I correct or not, but I know to some degree I am, and hey, it's opinionally, it's my opinion. So feel free to do with it whatever you want. Do take, like I would say, everything I tell you here, all with a grain of salt, okay? You can add some here, add a little some here, and basically just make sure you're going to end up living a life you've always wanted to live. Because information is power, but when at a loss at where to find information that is deserving of your lifetime and purpose, there is a danger to your existence that, if not curtailed, if not brought to, if not arrested, could lead you plummeting down to an impervious surface, which of course would mean you would die, unfortunately. So, as I was saying, the goal of suffering, therefore, is not to bring people into positions of downtroddenness, where, is there such a word? I don't think there's such a word. It's not to bring people to a point where there is no hope anymore, okay? It's not to necessarily take you to the cross. No, the goal of suffering is not to keep you by the roadside as a beggar. No, the goal of suffering is not to get you to be in a quiet state of desperation. No, the goal of suffering is actualization and revelation. Okay? Now, everybody is responsible for the outcome of his or her own life. If you don't suffer, how then will you know what the next phase of your life will be? There is no worthy feat in life that is desirous of attainment that can be achieved or attained without some degree of suffering. Point, therefore, is this: suffering has one eternal purpose, which is to brew you, to refine the sufferer, in quotes, into an ideal person to serve a defined or predestined purpose, in the event that suffering is properly understood. Now, I had to take time to properly spell that out, because if suffering is not understood, and if the purpose of suffering is not well held, then human beings, you, stand a chance of living a life of quiet desperation, complaining, blaming, and utter regret. You will, in a single word, be miserable. You will be miserable. There is no debate. There is no argument. Okay. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is there are moments of bliss, there are moments of suffering, and there are moments of revelation and enlightenment. Okay. Let's take the story of a very religious figure that we know, a very popular religious figure that we know. Jesus Christ. I wanted talking about the Buddha, but then, Jesus. Oh, no. Let's use the Buddha. Okay? Let's use the Buddha. The Buddha had his moments of bliss. His early years as a child, as an infant growing in the palace. Then he stepped out of the palace. And in the borderline, that brief period there were questions. He asked questions, a lot of questions. And when he was done with all those questions, he decided to go on a journey to alleviate suffering from all of mankind. For some weird reason, now I'm thinking about it, I don't know why he would want to do that, but that is something to, really meditate upon. But anyways, moving on. He took out time, understood that for him to alleviate suffering, he has to understand what suffering meant. And that meant for him to go through series of experiences. And of course, in those years while he was studying under his teachers and masters, he did fall sick, he did feel hunger, he did experience aging, weight loss, and everything. He experienced the crux of what, quote unquote, would be the downtown of life. Yeah, there's uptown, which is bliss. There's downtown, which is of course suffering. But then it was part of life. Do you understand? The suffering is part of life, is a necessary experience, one that should be savored, squeeze the juice out of it, that when you do come out of it, everything or anything that will cause you to go back to suffering will be taken completely and entirely out of the picture. Okay, so after suffering, he got to a point of revelation. There was that point that Buddha got to, and he realized that he was doing it all wrong. Suffering was just but for a moment, okay? And if the lessons was not learnt, it extended the period of your suffering. Let's take a minute and go through that, okay? Understand something here. In life, one of the underlying natural laws is this: you will continue repeating a particular cycle in your life over and over and over and over and over again, unless you learn your lesson. And what is the goal of every class? Is that you learn and grow. You learn and grow. If you're not growing, you're dying. Therefore, if you spend more than the number of years you're supposed to spend in school, you will be rusticated. If you spend more than the number of years you're supposed to spend in bliss, you will end up a wanderer. You will waste your life in the pleasures of this world. Same law applies when it comes to suffering. So if you are at a point in your life where you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, good. That is revelation. Welcome to stage 3. If, of course, you can call that stage 3. But yeah, moving on, okay? So after revelation comes enlightenment, okay? The truth, therefore, stares you in the face, saying, good, suffering was meant to brew you, okay? Bliss was meant to, succor you. You were still a child, so you needed nurturing and everything. So yes, the errors of the time of bliss and the pleasures prior. But you got into the point where you had to suffer for you to come to a deeper knowledge of what life means. And you experienced that. And however long that would take for you, because it varies for everybody, you got to suffer. And when you had finished your period and years of suffering, you had the revelation, the awareness of truth. From then onwards is only but enlightenment. At that point, you're tasked with the sole responsibility of teaching, of showing, of leading people through those unimaginable stages of life that they might not be able to handle in a world without knowledge. Okay, so the goal is this: that you learn and you grow, and understand that suffering is not something you pray against and go around or above, in my opinion, but rather something you go through. And like I said, however long or short your stay in the world or the valley of suffering, I think the Bible calls it the going through the valleys of Baca, forgotten which of the Psalms, okay? However long you will spend in that valley of tears and pain and discomfort is entirely up to you, okay? It varies for most people. Some people it might be 7 years, some might be 10, some might be 3 months, maybe a week, whatever happens, make sure you don't relent, knowing that after suffering comes a revelation. So seek knowledge, seek information, and thus from there you will grow. I'd like to chip in something before we round up for today. Okay, suffering can be chosen. Okay, we always have choices in life. It's one of the beautiful things that comes with being alive. We always have choices. One of those choices we have is there are two ways that leads to the market. Taz can either take the bush path or he can take the normal road. So you're either taking in life, through the journey of life, you're either taking the path less traveled or the path most traveled upon. Okay, so let's say you take the path most traveled upon. Apparently you will find more resistance. The journey will be slower because of course everybody's taking that path. So there will be traffic, there will be gridlock, okay, there will be discomfort, there will be road rage, there will be all sorts of things that of course will make the path long and all the more arduous. Okay, the short path, okay, is rigged with danger, uncertainty, greater degree of discomfort. Yes, but the lesson and the destination are worth the risk. Okay, so I say this and trying to link that up with business, because the whole idea of Opinion Valley, or Alley rather, is to see how we can share views on the topics of love, life, and business. Yes, so when it comes to business, of course, the whole idea of business is to make more money, yeah, and also to change the world, to create businesses, to create employment for people, to serve the world, to do something that makes the world a better place than you found it. That is the whole idea of what businesses are. Among other personal reasons why people indulge, this for me is the reason or the definition of what business is. Okay, so in regards to suffering as it applies to business, all we need to understand, or part of what we need to take home from today's little sermon or session, is this: that your goal for business are always going to be the defined priority when you start. How far or how fast or how slow you go towards getting to that goal will be, of course, based, like I said, on the knowledge you have, okay, and the skill set you're able to put into practice. Okay, so suffering in this wise will mean that there will be months and periods when, of course, it might not feel like you're making sales, you're not getting good leads, your customers are not showing up for whatever it takes, whether as an employer or as an employee. Of course, the scenarios vary, but we'll leave that for another day. Okay, the point, therefore, is this: understand that the valley of Baraka will pass, the tears and the pain will pass, but at the end of this tunnel is the light. Okay, good. When it comes also to relationship, it's not always going to be rosy. No, it is not. Whether as a friend, as a couple, or as colleagues, relationship is key. You will not always understand. You will not always have that peace of mind that comes with knowing that the next person is not going to act entirely the way you want the person to act. Okay? But then understand that this too shall pass. Everything has its time. However long it's going to stay depends on how you handle it. Depends on what you know, the skills you have upstairs, okay? And how you put them into practice, of course, reaction time and all that. And thirdly, before I get into life. So that, my dear friends, is all we have for today and for this week, okay? So there is, I believe, joy knowing now that suffering is not entirely bad, except the way you perceive it. So seek out a path less traveled, and of course, however arduous the road may be, however tortuous the climb may seem, however scorching the sun may be, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and your suffering will prove itself evident at your point of revelation. enlightenment, and bliss shall be all you will experience all the days of your life. Understand the place of suffering in your life and use it to your better advantage. This is Aaron from Opinion Alley. Enjoy the rest of your day.